Rejoice, for I bring you glorious news. God walks among us. Opening lines of the Lectitio Divinitatis. In the grim darkness of the far future, redemption is a concept so rare it might as well be myth. Those who fall to chaos are damned eternally, their souls claimed by the dark gods and their minds twisted beyond recognition. To turn back from the precipice once one has gazed into the warp is considered impossible. To reject chaos after fully embracing it, unthinkable. Yet there exists one who did the impossible. This is the story of a word-bearer who betrayed the Emperor, who participated in some of the most heinous acts of the Horus Heresy, who watched his legion damn itself in pursuit of false gods, and who found the strength to turn away from it all. This is the chronicle of a warrior who gave up his very name in pursuit of penance, who became known only by his chosen purpose, the Anchorite, the one who has faith, the one who locks himself away from the world to become closer to God. This is the tale of the only loyal word-bearer. The warrior who would become the Anchorite began his path in the Great Crusade, among the first aspirants taken from Colchis after the Primarch Lorgar was discovered by the Imperium. Colchis was a world steeped in religious tradition, a planet where faith was as natural as breathing. When Lorgar arrived with his adoptive father Cor-Pharon, he brought with him a vision of divinity that would reshape the planet's beliefs. The young aspirant, whose original name is lost to history, grew up in this atmosphere of fervent worship. He memorized the words of the Lectitio Divinitatis, the great work penned by Lorgar himself that proclaimed the Emperor of mankind to be not merely a man, but a god deserving of worship. These words burned themselves into his mind, shaping his understanding of the universe and his place within it. When he was selected to join the Wordbearers Legion, it seemed a natural continuation of his faith. Here was the ultimate expression of devotion, to become one of the Emperor's angels, to spread the truth of his divinity across the galaxy, to bring the light of faith to the dark corners of space. But the Emperor did not want worship. He wanted compliance, conquest, and the eradication of all religion in favor of the imperial truth, the doctrine of reason, science, and atheism. The word-bearers found themselves in an impossible position. Their very purpose, the core of their identity, was antithetical to the will of the being they worshipped. The breaking point came at Monarchia. The word-bearers had transformed the planet core into a monument to their faith, with its capital city Monarchia standing as perhaps the greatest expression of religious devotion the galaxy had ever seen. Lorgar had personally designed it, and the word-bearers had poured their hearts into its creation. The Emperor's response was devastation. He ordered the Ultramarines, led by Robert Guilliman, to make an example of the word-bearers. Monarchia was burned to ash. The entire Word-Bearers Legion was summoned to kneel in those ashes before the Emperor, Guilliman, and Malcador the Sigillite. There, the Emperor berated them for their worship, ordering them to abandon their faith and conform to the imperial truth. For the young word-bearer who would become the Anchorite, this moment was shattering. Everything he had believed, everything he had been taught, seemed suddenly wrong. But unlike many of his brothers, he did not immediately embrace rage and betrayal. Instead, confusion and pain took root in his heart, seeds that would later grow into something unexpected. After Monarchia, Lorgar descended into self-imposed isolation, emerging with a terrible new truth. If the Emperor would not accept their worship, then they would find gods who would. Through the manipulation of Cor-Pharon and First Chaplain Erebus, the word-bearers were introduced to the Chaos Gods, the primordial truth, as Lorgar came to call it. The Anchorite, like nearly all his brothers, embraced this new faith. The Chaos Gods welcomed worship. They promised power, purpose, and a truth that the Emperor had denied them. What did it matter if these gods demanded blood and souls? At least they did not reject devotion. He joined his legion in their betrayal of the Imperium. He participated in the Horus Heresy with the same fervor he had once served the Emperor. At the drop site massacre on Istvan Phi, he was there when the word-bearers helped slaughter loyalist space marines in one of the most treacherous acts in Imperial history. He fought believing he served a higher purpose, that the Chaos Gods represented a greater truth than the Emperor's lies. And then came Calth. The Battle of Calth was meant to be the word-bearers' revenge against the Ultramarines, the legion that had humbled them at Monarchia. Cor-Pharon led the assault, determined to utterly destroy Robert Guilliman's domain. The word-bearers struck with overwhelming force, using warpcraft and treachery to devastating effect. It was while fighting the Ultramarines beneath the surface of Calth that the warrior was struck by an epiphany. As his legion brought ruin to the world, as word-bearers and Ultramarines killed each other in the darkness, he suddenly understood the futility of it all. He looked back upon what had caused his legion's downfall. The Ultramarines had broken the word-bearers by destroying Monarchia, but it had not killed them. In fact, it had made them stronger in their rage and determination. Now the word-bearers were doing the same to the Ultramarines, humbling them, devastating their worlds, killing their warriors, and the result would be the same. The 13th Legion would only come back stronger, more determined to break the word-bearers in turn. It was a cycle, an endless, pointless cycle of revenge and retribution that would spill across the entire galaxy and continue forever. The word-bearers would strike the Ultramarines, who would strike back, who would be struck again, on, accomplishing nothing except perpetual war. In that moment of clarity, as the sounds of battle raged around him, the warrior became disillusioned with everything. Disillusioned with Lorgar, who had led them down this path. Disillusioned with the Chaos Gods, whose truth had brought only this endless cycle of hatred. Disillusioned with his own actions. He wanted no part in causing that endless war. Though he could not stop the battle, he could stop his own part in the cycle. He surrendered to the Ultramarines. Surrendering to the enemy during the Horus Heresy was unthinkable. Word-bearers did not surrender. They fought to the death or achieved victory. His brothers would have considered him a traitor. The Ultramarines had every reason to execute him on the spot. But Roboute Guilliman was not a man of simple revenge. When the Primarch of the Ultramarines heard of this word-bearer who had laid down his arms and expressed remorse for what his legion had done, Guilliman made a decision that would ripple across millennia. He ordered the remorseful word-bearer to be spared. Instead of execution, the warrior would be imprisoned. It was an act of mercy that defied logic. This was a traitor, a word-bearer who had participated in the betrayal at Calth. By every measure, he deserved death. Yet Guilliman saw something in this surrender. Perhaps a glimmer of the man the Emperor had wanted the word-bearers to be. Perhaps a tactical opportunity, or perhaps simple compassion for a warrior who had realized the horror of his actions. The prisoner was taken from Calth and played no further part in the Horus Heresy. While his legion fought at the Siege of Terra, he sat alone in a cell and prayed for their souls. Imprisoned in the black cells on Terra, the warrior had nothing but time to contemplate. Alone in the darkness, he faced the full weight of what he had done. He had betrayed the Emperor. He had helped damn his legion. He had participated in acts of horrific treachery. The demons came, as they always do, to those who have touched chaos. They whispered in the darkness, offering power, promising forgiveness from the Chaos Gods, tempting him to embrace the warp once more. Some offered threats, others offered rewards, but all tried to sway him back to the service of the Dark Gods. He banished them all and continued his prayers and penance. In the solitude of his cell, surrounded by stone and silence, the warrior did something extraordinary. He embraced the worship of the Emperor once again. Not the Emperor as he was, a being who rejected worship, but the Emperor as Lorgar had first envisioned him in the Lectitio Divinitatus, the Emperor as God. From memory, he began to recite the words of the Lectitio Divinitatus. He had memorized it in his youth on Colchis, before Monarchia, before the fall, before chaos. Now those words became his anchor, his salvation, his path back to the light. He cast off his old identity, the name he had borne as a word-bearer. That man had died on Calth when he realized the futility of the cycle. In his place arose the Anchorite, not a name, but a title, a role, a purpose. An Anchorite is one who withdraws from the world to live in solitude and pray, one who locks himself away to become closer to God. This was his penance. This was his redemption. The Anchorite's imprisonment did not end with the Horus Heresy. As the Imperium rebuilt and the survivors struggled to make sense of the galaxy Horus had torn apart, the Anchorite remained in his cell, but he was not forgotten. In the aftermath of the heresy, as humanity searched for meaning in the catastrophe that had nearly destroyed them, faith in the Emperor began to spread. The Imperial Cult was taking root, growing from the very document that Lorgar had once penned, the Lectitio Divinitatus. The nascent ecclesiarchy discovered they had a living source of that sacred text. The Anchorite knew the Lectitio Divinitatus by heart. every word, every passage. More than that, he understood it in a way few could. He had learned it from the world that had shaped Lorgar. He had lived through the consequences of faith and its rejection, and he had found his way back to belief through the darkest of trials. The ecclesiarchy came to him, and the Anchorite began preaching and writing the words of the Lectitio Divinitatis. His written words were given to the members of the growing church. The Anchorite became one of the voices that guided the newly created ecclesiarchy, helping to shape the theological foundations of what would become the state religion of the Imperium. The irony was profound. The Imperial Cult, the worship of the God Emperor that would dominate human civilization for 10,000 years, was being shaped in part by a repentant traitor marine from the very legion that had first fallen to chaos. But the weight of his past was crushing. The Anchorite's guilt over what the word-bearers had done, the betrayal, the deaths, the damnation of his legion, gnawed at him constantly. He had found faith, yes, but that faith brought with it the full understanding of how far he had fallen and what his actions had helped unleash upon the galaxy. Multiple times the Anchorite attempted suicide. He could not bear the knowledge that he had once served the dark gods, that his hands were stained with the blood of betrayal. Each time he was stopped or his attempt failed, until finally he nearly succeeded in his last attempt. To save his life, the Anchorite had to be interred within a Contemptor Dreadnought. His broken body was encased in adamantium and ceramite, his consciousness bound to the war machine. For some, this would be a prison. For the Anchorite, it was a reprieve. It meant he could continue his penance, continue spreading the words of the Divinitatis, continue his prayers. Even after his internment, the Dreadnought wished for death, but he chose instead to continue preaching, to keep serving, to make what small amends he could for his crimes. Eventually, he was transferred from Terra to the Cardinal World of Almace in the Odo-Aker system. There, beneath the planet's main palace in the deepest cells, the Anchorite was imprisoned and hidden. The current Cardinal, Aemon, ensured that the ancient Dreadnought remained secret, a source of theological guidance but also a reminder of dangerous truths. For millennia, the Anchorite sat in darkness and preached the Emperor's divinity, his words shaping the faith of billions who would never know his name or his nature. In late M41, after the Great Rift had torn the galaxy in two, the Word-Bearer's Chaos Lord Amet-Nim Ir-Nabas Lash discovered a terrible truth. During an invasion of an Imperial Ecclesiarchy world, he found extensive writings of the Lectitio Divinitatus, but these were not Lorgar's original words. They were copies, elaborations, commentaries, and their source was a lost word-bearer. Amat-Nim received a vision, which he believed came from Lorgar himself, ordering him to free this captured brother. The Chaos Lord became convinced that recovering the Anchorite would be the key to ending Lorgar's self-imposed isolation within the Eye of Terror and allowing the Demon Primarch to unite the fractious word-bearers under his direct command once again. When he discovered the prisoner's location on Almace, Amet-Nim brought the news to the Word-Bearer's Dark Council. The Dark Apostles ordered a full assault on the Cardinal World to recover their lost brother. The Word-Bearers came to Almace with overwhelming force. Their fleet crushed the system's defenses. Imperial Fist, Primaris Lieutenant Haid Calder, and an Indomitus, Crusade strike force attempted to fortify the world, but they were heavily outnumbered. When Amet-Nim finally breached the depths beneath Almace's palace and found the Anchorite, the Chaos Lord greeted his lost brother with joy. He had come to bring the Anchorite back to his legion, back to Lorgar, back to the Chaos Gods. The Anchorite's response was not what Amet-Nim expected. When Amet-Nim and his word-bearers confronted the Anchorite, they expected gratitude. They expected their lost brother to embrace them, to thank them for his liberation after 10,000 years of imprisonment. Instead, the Anchorite uttered a word of Colchis's ancient lost language, a word of power that created a bright light, banishing the demons that accompanied the word-bearers back into the warp. Amet-Nim greeted the Anchorite, confused by this action but still attempting to convince him to return to the Legion. He told the Dreadnought to stand aside so that the word-bearers could kill those who had imprisoned him for so many millennia. The Anchorite's response was immediate and definitive. He attacked. As he fought, the Anchorite decried the lies the Chaos Gods and Lorgar had told the word-bearers, which had led to their damnation. He praised the God Emperor for saving his soul and roared passages from the Lectitio Divinitatus. The irony was crushing. a word-bearer, fighting other word-bearers, shouting the very words that Lorgar himself had written before his fall. The Anchorite wielded the Lectitio Divinitatus as a weapon against those who had abandoned it. Enraged by this betrayal, Ametnim destroyed one of the Anchorite's arms. But the Dreadnought fought on with single-minded determination. Because the word-bearers had been ordered to bring him back alive, they could not simply destroy him. And this limitation cost them dearly. The Anchorite killed many of his wayward brothers, all while roaring the words of the Divinitatus. Then something miraculous occurred. The Anchorite manifested the powers of a living saint. The ancient Dreadnought, who had spent 10,000 years in prayer and penance, became a vessel for the Emperor's own power. Holy light blazed from the war machine as it tore through the word-bearers with righteous fury. When Imperial reinforcements finally arrived, led by Lieutenant Hayde Calder, the word-bearers were defeated. Ametnim was confronted by the Primaris Marine, and in his final moments, the Chaos Lord made a chilling observation. Even though the word-bearers had been defeated, they had won a victory on Almace. The Anchorite's existence had been revealed. The truth could not be denied. Much of the Imperial Creed, the state religion that had sustained the Imperium for 10 millennia, was based on Lorgar's original Lectitio Divinitatus. The Imperium and the Word-Bearers both followed the path originally laid down by Lorgar. The only difference was that the Word-Bearers were further along that path, having realized that the only true divinity lay with the Chaos Gods. It was a poisonous truth, designed to sow doubt and discord. Hayde Calder fatally struck down Ametnim before the Chaos Lord could spread his heresy further. After the Word-Bearers were driven from Almace, the Anchorite made a simple statement. He would return to the solitude of his cell to continue his penance. 10,000 years of imprisonment had not been enough. The battle, the manifestation of holy power, the defeat of his former brothers, none of it had absolved him of his guilt. He still bore the shame of having once served chaos. He still remembered the drop site massacre, the betrayal at Calth, all the blood on his hands. So the Anchorite returned to his cell, to his prayers, to his eternal vigil. The Imperials began hunting down the last of the Word-Bearers' forces on Almace, while the ancient Dreadnought descended once more into the darkness beneath the palace. The Anchorite represents one of the most profound contradictions in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. He is a traitor who became loyal. In a setting where redemption is considered impossible, the Anchorite turned away from chaos and back to the Emperor. He did not simply resist corruption, he embraced it, fell completely, and then climbed back out of the abyss through sheer force of will and faith. A word-bearer who preaches the Imperial Creed. The word-bearers are synonymous with chaos worship. They are the preachers of the dark gods, the zealots of damnation. Yet the Anchorite stands as proof that even a word-bearer can find the path back to the light, and in doing so he helped create the very religion that stands against everything his legion has become. A living connection to Lorgar's original vision, the Imperial Cult worships the Emperor as God, based largely on the Lectitio Divinitatus. Lorgar wrote that book before his fall. The Anchorite memorized it, lived it, abandoned it, and then returned to it. He is perhaps the only being in the galaxy who truly understands both what Lorgar originally intended and how far the word-bearers have fallen from that vision. A monument to guilt and faith. For 10,000 years, the Anchorite has existed in a state of perpetual penance. He will never forgive himself for what he did, but that guilt drives him to continue serving, to continue preaching, to continue trying to make amends for the unforgivable. Ametnim's dying words contained a truth that the Imperium would prefer to ignore. The Imperial Cult and the Word-Bearers worship according to principles established by the same source, Lorgar Aurelian's Lectitio Divinitatis. The Word-Bearers would argue that they simply followed the logical conclusion of Lorgar's teachings. If the Emperor was divine, then divinity itself exists. And if divinity exists, why limit it to the Emperor when the Chaos Gods offer proof of their power? They took Lorgar's theological framework and applied it to beings who actually welcomed worship. The Imperium conversely took Lorgar's framework and stopped exactly where Lorgar originally intended, at the worship of the Emperor alone. The Imperial Cult represents Lorgar's vision frozen at the moment before his fall. The Anchorite sits at the center of this theological tension. He knows both paths intimately. He has walked both roads, and he has chosen to dedicate eternity to proving that Lorgar's original vision, worship of the Emperor as God, was right, and that the Word-Bearer's embrace of chaos was the greatest mistake in their history. The Anchorite's impact on the Imperium is impossible to measure. How many billions have drawn strength from the words of the Lectitio Divinitatus that he helped preserve and spread? How many have found faith through doctrines he helped shape? The Imperial Cult, for all its excesses and darkness, has united humanity for 10 millennia, and the Anchorite played a role in its creation. Yet he remains hidden, locked away, a secret that the ecclesiarchy guards carefully. Because the truth of the Anchorite, that a traitor marine helped create their faith, that the Imperial Cult shares roots with the Word-Bearer's heresy, is dangerous. It raises questions that have no comfortable answers. What does it say about the Imperial Creed that it was shaped by a repentant Word-Bearer? What does it mean that Lorgar's vision, rejected by the Emperor, became the foundation of Imperial spirituality after the Emperor's internment in the Golden Throne? Is the Anchorite's redemption proof of the Emperor's divine mercy, or simply an accident of history? These are questions that the Imperium cannot answer, so it does what it always does with uncomfortable truths. It locks them away in the dark and pretends they don't exist. But the Anchorite continues his vigil regardless. He does not need recognition. He does not seek absolution. He knows he is damned by his past actions. All he can do is continue his penance, continue his prayers, and continue to serve the Emperor he once betrayed. In a universe without redemption, the Anchorite found it anyway. In a setting where those who fall to chaos are lost forever, he turned back. In a galaxy where faith is often corruption and devotion leads to damnation, he found a faith that saved him. The Anchorite is proof that even in the grim darkness of the far future, there can be hope. That even the most terrible mistakes can be confronted. That even a Word-Bearer, a member of the First Legion to fall, the preachers of chaos, the damned and the cursed, can find the path back to the light. It is not an easy path. It requires 10,000 years of penance. It demands the sacrifice of everything, including one's name and identity. It means accepting that you will never be forgiven, never be absolved, never be free of guilt, but serving anyway because service is all that remains. In his cell beneath Almace, the Anchorite stands vigil. His sensors scan walls covered in scripture. His weapons remain ready. His faith burns eternal. He is the penitent, the redeemed, the impossible. He is living proof that in the grim darkness of the far future there is more than just war. Sometimes there is also forgiveness, even if you can never forgive yourself. The one who has faith, the one who locks himself away from the world and keeps himself away from them to become closer to God.